Hey guys, thanks for having me. So in this presentation, I'm going to talk about what I do in the last 1.5 years, which is in the iOS development. So I don't work for others, I just alone. So as you said once, I'm a one-man army, which I really like. So this presentation is not going to be about technical topics. So I'm not going to talk about programming skills or tricks and stuff like that, because I think all of you are developers. And most of you are probably a better developer than me. So what is this is going to be all about is what I did. And just to make you more interested, I'm going to tell you some numbers. So in the last 1.5 years, I shipped 19 apps, which I have in the App Store, so these ones. Most of them are kind of a failure because they are not making too much money, but these are final products. And the most interesting one is Infinite Stories, the video resizer, my audiobook player. Yeah, that's it. And I had 360,000 downloads during this period and 6 million impressions in the App Store. And I tried to count the updates I did, but it was way too much. So just a tons of updates. And just a quick intro who I am. As you probably guessed, my name is Kovacs, and I'm from Eger, but I was living in Budapest for 8 years now, during the university and a bit after. And lately I moved to Barcelona, so I'm there right now, so you won't see me too often here. And my background in iOS development, I studied as an electrical engineer, and I took a class there about this topic, and after that I was really interested, so I started as an intern, and later I got a job here in Supercharge, which was JBS Labs back then, and it wasn't here, so it was a long time ago, where I worked for 2 years, and I think I learned iOS development there, not before. So thanks, guys. After that I switched to freelancing, which I did for 2.5 years, which I enjoyed because it had more freedom, but it wasn't for me. Sometimes I was too stressful, and I didn't really like communicating with more clients. And in February 2017, I switched to this stuff. It started as an experiment, so I wanted to do it for a year and then evaluate the results, and it convinced me to keep going. And if you check the last 3 steps, I wanted to mention that these 3 steps is, in terms of freedom and risk, it's kind of correlating. So when I had a job, it wasn't really a risky stuff because I had a salary at the end of every month, but the freedom wasn't there because you had to work somewhere. You have to work for 40 hours. You don't pick your projects, which I really can be stressful. It wasn't too stressful for me here, but it can be. So after that, I switched to freelancing, which you can think is like has much more freedom because you can pick your own project, and also you can have your own time, you can have your own schedule. But on the other hand, it's still risky. It's more risky because if the clients decide to stop working with you, it can happen that you don't have anything to do for like 1 or 2 months, where you are just burning your savings. So, and after that, because clearly it wasn't enough freedom for me, I switched to indie development, which is on the top in every level, because now I'm the one who decides what to work on, when to work on, or even to work or not to work. But on the other hand, it's way more riskier because on that first year I wasn't sure this is gonna work, so I wanted to just do something and try out before just saying that it's good for me or not good for me. Now it looks like it turned out pretty well, but we will see. Maybe in 2 years I'm just gonna have a job again. So how did I become an indie developer? So previously I always had IDs, which I did and released in the App Store. None of them were successful, but all the times I had some weird IDs that I wanted to implement. So for example, when iPhone 6 came out in 2014, I had this idea that it's too big to type with one hand. So I made an application which was basically a keyboard, which had the same size as the iPhone 5S keyboard. So I released this. Some people downloaded it, but it didn't convince me to keep going in this way. So it was just a fun project that I wanted to mention, that I already did this in 2014. So when I decided to do this, as I mentioned, it was an experiment. So I just thought about doing this for a year. So what I did first is I saved up 1 year of savings. So I didn't want to worry about any expenses, just to do it for a year without doing any freelancing. As I mentioned, I started in February 2017, and in that month I released my first project, which was an English grammar checker, which surprisingly did well. So it motivated me to keep going. And the first month when I turned profitable was in July 2017. So that since then I always made more than what I spent. But previously it was a bit stressful, of course. And now I would like to talk about how to ship your first app in the App Store, because this was just a catchy title. It's not gonna be that easy, and it's not gonna be making you millions. But so the first step is how to get an ID, and I guess most of you are developers here, and this part is more tricky than we thought, because so like a lot of times I had this idea to create something new, to change the word or something like that, but it won't work because you are alone. So what I suggest you is do not try to reinvent the wheel. Just try to make something which is already exists and try to make it a bit better. And how to get these ideas is pretty simple. You just have to think about in your own circle about your work or about your hobbies, and think about the stuff that you're already using and you're a bit annoyed with it. So for example, to connect back to my English grammar checker, the idea came from that when I was freelancing, I was always stressed about sending a professional email with a grammatical mistake, and back then I didn't know about Grammarly, so I always used some online services to check my grammar, that it's correct or not, and I thought it's gonna be a good app idea. So I checked in the App Store, and I only found really bad apps. So I decided to build my own, and that was it. So it wasn't super complicated. And so the next step is if you have an idea like this, you have to check in the App Store. And what you have to target is to that your competitors have to look really bad first, but they have to have some ratings. So that means like there is a market for that. So you don't need to build landing pages and stuff like that, which all the startups has, because if somebody's already doing that and they have ratings, that means that they have some traction and there is a need for that. And second thing about ratings, you need to aim for apps which has like less than 4-star ratings, because that means that's a really bad app, so you can do better. And also, if you check the written reviews, sometimes you can get really good ideas what to improve. The best apps already, the ones that are like maybe left there for 2 or 3 years without any update, because it's easy to outrank them in AI. So what I'm gonna talk about this later. So the next one, which is really important, is choose your pricing model. And there are 3 major pricing models in the App Store. The first one is the paid apps, and all of these models have the pros and cons. For paid apps, the pro is that once you convince the user from the screenshots, you already get the money, so you don't have to worry about them ever again. But the cons is that it's super hard to convince somebody just based solely on the screenshots, because that's what you are doing there. So it's not, in my opinion, now it's kind of outdated, but sometimes it works really well, because 2 years ago Apple released the search ads, and in the search ads basics you can basically set a target price to download an app for, let's say I want to pay $2 per download. And for paid apps it's really simple to just say that I have a $5 app and I can get traction for $2. Then of course you have to just run it all the time, but it wasn't that easy before. The second one, which is the most popular right now, is the freemium model, when you have a free app with in-app purchases. The good part is that it's so much easier to get downloads like this, and then you have time to convince the users to purchase your upgrade. So you have time to show them how your app is better than your competitor's app. But the con is that there is one more conversion point. So you don't have that. It's not enough to convince the people to download your app. You also have to convince them to purchase, and this friction makes it a bit more difficult, and also it's a bit more. It's hard to like do search ads because if you have like 2% conversion rate to paid and your app costs $10, then you can easily calculate that like one download doesn't mean too much for you. And the third one, which is gaining traction nowadays, is subscription model, which is really good in my perspective as a developer, because it means like it's a recurrent payment for me. So it's more predictable, it's easier for me to handle this whole stuff, and I don't have to worry that. So I'm not starting from zero each month if I do subscription. But on the other side, I think it's still really hard to convince people to do subscription if you're not Netflix or if you're not giving a really good service. So that has the lowest conversion rate to paid. So the building part, I don't want to talk about this because you guys know how to build apps. So this is the third step that you have to do. And what I want to talk about instead of this is the three metrics that actually matters as an individual developer. I don't care in the beginning about like daily active users, monthly active users. It matters later, but in the beginning what you have to aim is first to get a high number of impressions. The impression is so like every time your app appears anywhere in the App Store, that counts as an impression, and that's gonna be your main sales channel. The second metric is the conversion rate from impression to downloads, because that's the percentage of people who see your app, and after that they will download it. And the third metric is from the conversion rate from downloads to purchase, and that's all it matters for you, because in the beginning you just have to optimize these three until you will reach a point when it varies to focus on other stuff. And after you build the app, it's not the end. So it's not just like a building process and then you release it. You have to focus on releases, and you have to focus on only features and ideas that will help you to increase the conversion in these metrics. So that's all that matters. And for example, the last time when I released Infinite Stories 3.0, first I changed the keywords. So I tried to get more people to see my apps in the App Store. That was how to increase the number of impressions. Then I changed the description, and I also changed the screenshots, which matters a lot in the App Store, to convince more people to download my app. And the last is that I added a lot of new features that my users asked, but all of them were behind a paywall. So I try to convince more people to purchase my app. And I wanted to have an example, which I just had like 2 hours ago, that for example, we have when we are presenting, we have this small stick to remotely control the presentation, not me, but like in general. And I thought about the only advantage is that it has a physical button, so you have the response without looking at, and you don't have to check your phone and look really weird. So what if we build an app which can remotely control your presentation, and the only way to progress is if you force touch it, and it will give you a feedback with a haptic feedback. So then you just have to hold it like this. I'm not sure it exists or not. So the next, so like that was the idea part. And the next is I wanted to check the competitors, and as you can see, they look really bad. They look really shitty, which is a good start. But at this point, I would stop, because as you can see, they don't have any ratings, because you could see the ratings here. And this is the Spanish app store, so that it's not even a Hungarian app store, so they have much more ratings and still nothing. So that means probably the market is not big enough. So I would stop at this point, but just to follow this, I wanted to say like, okay, this looks promising, so let's find a pricing model. And first, if you go back, you can see that all of them are free, except one. Both of them has in-app purchases, so it's probably a freemium model. and that's a good target to check what your competitors are doing, and I would go with the same. On the other hand, this app is something that people would use regularly, not just once. The people who are presenting, they are presenting more often. So it's a good idea to use subscriptions. But after I thought about it like for 20 minutes, I decided that maybe it's not something valuable enough to ask for a recurring payment for only a small remote. So that's how I would pick for this, a one-time purchase after a freemium model. And yeah, that's it. And then you have to build it, and then you have to just try to optimize it and do it again and again and again. So the things I learned about this 1.5 years, which is not a long time, I'm still in the beginning, but there were three main things that I thought it's not that important, but super important. And the first is the importance of ASO. ASO is App Store Search Optimization, which is basically the way, it's like SEO, but for the App Store. And it's super important because that's your free marketing channel, and that's what matters for indie developers, because I don't have millions to spend in advertising. So what does it mean is basically optimizing your name, subtitle, description, and the keywords, which is only 100 characters. So you have to be really picky about this, and it's a topic that can be a presentation itself. And an example is that I had a video resizer app which was super simple. It was able to resize any video to any other format. So if you have a landscape video, you are able to convert it to a square video without cropping anything. And it wasn't doing super well. It was getting like 20 downloads each day. And when IGTV came, Instagram's YouTube competitor, I had decided that I checked in the App Store, and not too many apps targeted IGTV. So what I did is I changed the name of Video Resizer to Video Resizer for IGTV. And in the impressions, this is the point where I changed the name. And this is the number of impressions, but this correlates to the number of downloads and to the number of people who purchase my app. So this is how important is ASO, and this is just a really small change that you have to be clever about. And the second one is the communication. We tend to talk about we are a big company, and we are working so far. I'm the CEO and the CTO of my apps. But what I feel like is it's much better to be more personal. So every time in my app I say that I made this app, I also have the feedback button as a send me a message, not send us a message, and I personally answer all of this, which I believe helps the conversion rate, because people are more likely to support other individuals than big companies, at least in this field. And also all the feedback emails are going to my personal inbox, so I try to answer all the time in 24 hours, but sometimes in 3 days, but still really fast enough. And what I wanted to mention still, that you have to keep iterating, so it's not enough to just release an app. So what you can see is here the number of downloads of my app Infinite Stories in the last 7 days, I think. And what you can see, it fluctuates a bit. It has like plus minus 15% of downloads. But the thing is that when you make a change, which has like 1% difference, you won't see it here. You have to check the big picture. You have to go back in like a year, because these small changes adds up, and together they will make you a momentum, and you will see how the app goes. This small spike is just some Chinese downloads. That doesn't really matter. It was everywhere in the App Store, but so like you can clearly see it's going upwards. And what else I wanted to say is that if you want to be an indie, there are like good and bad sides, and it's not just about the good stuff, which is here, that you can make your own schedule. There is no boss, no deadline. So if I don't want to work, I just don't work. There is nothing I have to do at that point. And also the potential to scale my revenue is not based on how much I work. So if something happens or I figure out something and I will 5x my revenue, I don't have to work 5 times more than now. So that's a really good thing in my opinion. And the cons is it's as I mentioned, it's much more risky. You don't have a salary at any months, and it can be really lonely because I work alone, and if you don't have people around you who are doing the same, you can easily just stay at home and, I don't know, get depressed. And the third one is more important, that if you are stuck, there is no one to ask for. So David, the CTO, is not here, but when I was working for Supercharge and I was stuck all the time, I just asked him and he helped me out. Now I have to do all this on my own. So that's what I wanted to say, and you can check me on Twitter. Sometimes I tweet about the indie stuff, and if you have any questions, just ask me. I'm here. So, questions? Yeah?
I just think that have you tried community offices or something like that, or working in cafes or something?
Yes, I did. I usually don't like co-working spaces because it's too loud and it's full of life coaches and stuff like that. So here in Budapest, I worked from the library because it's silent, and the social activity was I went to lunch with my friends. But now in Barcelona, I signed up for a co-working space, but solely the reason to get friends. And also it's a silent workspace. It's just not better than a library. Yeah?
Considering you have a number of apps, I was wondering, did they ever get rejected in the review process?
Oh, a lot of times.
So what is the main reason?
The main reason...
I didn't want to shoot the first part.
Yeah, the main reason is the subscription. Because if you include subscription in your apps, they are really strict about it. So you have to include this much text about like how to cancel your stuff, and that has to be seen on that screen. And that text is changing in like every 2 months, so it's super hard to keep up with it. So I just like usually submit with the old one, and when they reject, they will tell me what I'm missing. But yeah, sometimes it happens that I'm rejected. That's just part of the game, I guess. Anything else? Yeah?
I'm interested in the design part. So, do you do your design of the apps, or you hire someone else?
So far, I did all the design myself. I just took some course, like online courses about Sketch, and I tried to do something with it. But in my opinion, my apps doesn't look so good. So now it's the time when I want to invest in a designer to make at least my most popular apps more appealing in general. Sorry.
Just as you mentioned, it's easier to get downloads after you have some reviews in the store. But do you have any best practices to get the first reviews?
Yes. I didn't want to talk about this in this detail, but what I experienced lately that you have this built-in review prompt and that converts pretty well. And what I experienced is that even if you put your review prompt in, like right now I put my review prompt in Infinite Stories on the first use after they exported something. So I have to find a time when they got some success, but as early as possible, because the number of ratings helps a lot in the for your app to rank well in the App Store. So just put it as early as possible in a good timing. That's it.
Yeah, as far as I understood, you are a better developer than a professional in ASO. Why don't you work with someone who is professional?
In ASO? In ASO?
Yeah.
The reason is that ASO is not a science. It's just a try and error stuff. So people who are saying that they are professional in ASO is super hard to check that they are professionals or just like me who are trying out stuff. So that's the reason. I would rather work on stuff as a design or developer where I can measure the progress. In ASO, it's gonna be exactly the same as what I do. It's just like trial and error. So I feel like it's and also it's a valuable skill to learn. So
Okay, but I mean, if you are good in development, then you could use that time for development.
that's true, but ASO doesn't take too much time. So it's more about collecting the data and then evaluating it. So at least what I do right now is more about this. So for example, now I released an app in the Play Store. So for my teleprompter app, I hired a guy from Upwork to make an Android version. And the whole reason to release that Android app was to... So now in the Play Store you can see that the downloads are coming from which keywords, which is a super important stuff for me. So yeah, it's I don't know. I just enjoy doing it, and I don't feel it's necessary to outsource that part.
Thanks.
What kind of app do you use to keep these 18 apps daily tasks on track?
I use Workflowy. I don't know that you heard about it or not. It's basically just a list of stuff, but you can indent in. And I just work on the stuff on the apps that makes me money. So I don't want to go back, but I have apps which I did not update for like 6 months now, which is kind of embarrassing. But
yeah.
But in every Monday I just go through all my apps. I check the analytics and see that if there is a traction in some of them, or so that's how I decide what to work on. Yeah.
You mentioned that you try to reply to customers in 3 days if they would contact you. What was their main way of contacting you? Did you leave like an email or a handle on your app?
It just opens the basic email form.
Oh, okay, so you just have something clickable.
Yeah, it's like send me an email or send me a feedback, and it will just pop up the mail app.
And how often do you get people actually communicate?
I got like 2 or 3 emails per day. So that's why I said if I'm gonna 10x my customer base, I'm happy to answer 20 emails per day for them. Yeah. So that's it. Yeah, thank you guys.